Hello everybody and welcome to today's episode in the Get Unstuck series with myself, Sarah Archer. I am a career and leadership coach and I work with female leaders to create the kind of career success that's right for them without burning out or selling out. And I do that through either working with them on their career advancement strategy to get to that next level or working with them on their impact, influence and confidence in their existing role. And I created the Get Unstuck series. If you haven't been on one of my sessions before, I created it because I know as a female leader, I used to be an HR director, it's really hard to find the time to think about your career development, your leadership development, where you're heading, what you want more of, what you want less of, all of that good thinking. You just don't have the time because the day job, the day leadership job is just so full on. So I thought I would do these sessions, they're around 15 minutes every other Wednesday to give you a mini break in the middle of your week to think about some of the important issues that you might face as a leader and as a leader in your career, where you want to take it. So if you want to kind of look at some of the topics that have gone before, you can find all of the lives in my profile, my LinkedIn profile in the events section. And I also now have a podcast, Unstuck and Unstoppable, and we'll put a link in the comments later, where you can also consume all of that great career and leadership content, but in a way that maybe might be more convenient when you're walking the dog, or you're in the gym, or however you like to consume your audio content. So if you are here with me live, do say hello. It's always nice to know that people are with me. I use StreamYard and I can never see how many people are on live. So do pop a hello in the comments if you're with me. Or if you're watching on replay and you've got a question, then just tag me in and I'll come back and answer the question later. But obviously if you're here live and you've got a question, just throw it in. So today we're talking about failure. And I thought this would be a good topic to talk about because I think it's something we don't talk about enough because we don't want to feel vulnerable, share our failures necessarily. And I think as a leader, the more senior we get in the organisation, the more our appetite for failing reduces because the stakes can feel higher, it feels riskier to fail, because the ripples you can feel that it's not just you that it might impact your team, it might impact your peers, it might impact the business in terms of results. And so failure feels a much kind of bigger, riskier thing to embark on. So I'd love to know if you are here live, maybe just let me know how you feel about failure. So maybe answer the question with a yes or a no. Are you willing to fail, to try something that might fail in your current career? So maybe just give me a yes or a no if you are thinking about doing something, but you're kind of holding yourself back because you're worried about failing. And I think it's important to talk about it because I think that normalizes it more. You know, lots of the people that I work with, lots of the women leaders that I work with experience a lot of the things we're going to talk about today in terms of why failure can make us feel really uncomfortable, can feel really hard. And there's lots of things at play. It's very complex. When I was preparing for this session, I was thinking, gosh, this is actually quite a few sessions worth, but I'm going to try and distill it into one session with some practical things about how you can get more comfortable with it. But obviously, we've got external things that can play into why we feel uncomfortable about failure. So that can be, what's the organisation that you're in? What's their approach to failure? Are they very risk averse? Because that can impact on how you feel about experimenting with things that might not work first time. And also we've got all the internal stuff, which is going to be different for different people. But some of this I'm sure will resonate with you. So there's a lot of fear around failure. So that could be fear around what other people might think about you if you fail. Might be fear about what the implications of failure might be for your career. And just fear about kind of exposing yourself, all the kind of imposter feelings kind of play in when you're thinking about doing something that could make you vulnerable. Also that kind of self-doubt and just your general level of confidence. If you're not feeling hugely confident in your career, then obviously you're less likely to take risks. And we've got the whole risk bias issue as well, in that we all have a risk bias in our brain, but some people's risk bias is higher, which means you focus on the things that could go wrong more than the things that could go right. And if you've got a high risk bias, then you're less likely to want to pursue opportunities that could be that could fail, because you can see all the things that could go wrong and where it might lead to. Then we've got our narrative, the story we tell ourselves about failure, and this can obviously be rooted in our early experiences in childhood, in our early career, and that's the narrative we tell ourselves before we embark on something that could be risky. And it's also the narrative that we tell ourselves after that thing hasn't gone to plan, and that can be dangerous because it can then impact our existing confidence and sense of self. We're going to come on to that as well. And then we've got the issues around things like the cultural conditioning and gender expectations. Girls are conditioned generally to kind of be nice, to please people, to do the right thing, play by the rules, where boys are encouraged to be more risky, to be bolder. And so this can play into that deep-rooted fear of failure, because it threatens our identity of having to get things right, which has been reinforced for us. So that's one of the things that can also play into why we find failure uncomfortable. We've also got the double bind as female leaders, in that we have to be strong, but not too strong. We have to be nice and warm and welcoming, but not being seen as weak. And therefore, failures can feel more visible and more personal because we're already navigating a lower margin of acceptability. And, female leaders, when they fail, can be judged more harshly than their male counterparts, which can also play into why we don't want to push ourselves to do things where it could end in failure. And then we've got this thing called representation pressure, which is probably more unconscious, but where obviously there are fewer women in senior leadership, and therefore that burden of representation can feel real. So that if we fail, we feel not that we are just failing in terms of ourselves and letting ourselves down. We might also feel that it's a blow to women's progress, which is a huge burden to kind of carry around, even if it's an unconscious one. So you can see why the whole kind of failure piece can be really complicated and feel quite tricky to navigate your way through it. And I've failed a lot, I can hold my hand up. I haven't always been comfortable with it, and I haven't always learned from it, particularly kind of in my earlier career, but definitely in HR, I've had initiatives that have failed. I've had things that haven't landed well. I know there are things where I didn't do the groundwork for those initiatives to be accepted and to be successful. I've failed personally when I've gone for interviews that I haven't got, when I felt like that job was my job. I've done business launches in my career that have failed, have bombed. I've taken decisions which haven't delivered what I wanted them to deliver. But I've put a lot of work in to get more comfortable with that, because in your business you have to do it. Because if you want your business to be successful, you have to take risks. So I have put the work in to be able to see failure in a different way, and some of that I'm going to share with you today. Because obviously there are benefits to failing, which might not sound, it might sound counterintuitive, but there are, because obviously we know that we grow through experimentation, through failing, as well as through success. There's lots of learning there in terms of our personal development. If we stay in our comfort zone, that's a great place. It's comfortable and warm, but it's, where we get stuck there, we don't move forward and grow. And also failing allows us to be clearer about the path to success next time. Plus it helps us to develop stronger risk resilience, so that we know that we can cope if things don't go well, and we can develop that resilience to enable us to have another go, to try something again, and increase our optimism about the success that we're going to have next time, because we've learned from the thing that didn't go well. And also as leaders, as female leaders, we do need to role model experimentation and failure being okay to our teams to enable them to grow, to increase their capability and their performance in the organisation. To create a culture that enables people to think, I can try this because the repercussions are not going to be me losing my job if it doesn't go well, because I know that will help the business grow by me building my capability and skills. And obviously building your team's capability and skill is going to enable the business to be more successful. So there are lots of benefits to failing, so reasons to get comfortable with it. So now I'm going to just talk you through 4 ways that you can experiment with to get more comfortable, and choosing the ones that are going to resonate most with you. So the first one is to rewrite the failure narrative, because what tends to happen when we fail is, and particularly for women, is that we internalize that failure into an identity-based failure. So I failed rather than something failed. So rather than seeing it as a situational event, something that happened that didn't work well, we internalize it, and we might say things like, I messed up, I failed, I'm terrible at this, I let them down, rather than saying, that strategy didn't land, I'm still learning this skill, or I'm human, we all make decisions with the best information we have at the time. So being able to place it in the external context of the situation failed rather than I failed can be a really powerful way of getting more comfortable with it and protecting our internal self-identity, our internal confidence, not letting that failure erode that, because we don't want that to happen, because otherwise you start to see yourself as somebody who fails. We want to see ourselves as somebody who experiments and learns from that and can understand the situation and the impact of that situation on that success or not. So if you start to notice you are using I to describe the failure, as in I failed, I messed up, etc., you want to be able to flip that to, let me understand the situation, what went wrong in that situation, what didn't land, what didn't happen, rather than it being I. So it's not about absolving responsibility, but it's about not letting it become an identity crisis, if you like, and eroding your inner confidence. The second thing is to understand the neuroscience of failure, because failure is wired like a threat for the brain. And obviously, we know our brain cannot distinguish between physical danger and social risk. And the social risk, obviously, is around failure, rejection, all of those things. And what happens is that our amygdala and our limbic brain is activated when it senses a threat, and that's that fight, flight, or freeze response. And obviously, what we want to be able to do is to recognize that that's what's happening. So recognizing that anxiety that you're feeling is a response to the limbic brain being activated, and to be able to use tools to calm yourself down in that situation. So naming it is part of that. Okay, I know that I'm being triggered here, and that's why I'm feeling this level of anxiety. And what I might need to do then is to do some breathing exercises or some mindfulness meditation techniques, if that's what works for you, or to think about engaging the prefrontal cortex of the brain through things like coaching, journaling, reflection, that help move it from an emotional response in the limbic system into a more logical processing response. And that will then help you to respond to the failure or whatever's gone wrong in a much more considered way. So just being able to kind of notice what's going on, to understand the neuroscience of failure, and to be able to respond to it in a logical way. Then the third approach is tapping into positive psychology and seeing failure as a route to flourishing. And that tips into what I was mentioning earlier about it helps us to build resilience. It helps us also to build that kind of grit, that tenacity, that perseverance, to know that actually this failure is part of me being successful in the long run and flourishing and growing. and seeing it as an opportunity for growth. So that can be asking yourself great coaching and reflection questions. So things like, what did I discover about myself in that situation? What values were I connecting with when I made that decision or that choice? And, what's the growth that this opportunity is giving me? So being able to position it using questions like that can turn it from failure into it's part of my journey, and I'm going to use it in a productive way. And then the fourth thing is to build self-compassion. And we need self-compassion as female leaders because we tend to go to that inner critic that beats us up, that taps into that narrative that's about you failing, you being rubbish, you messing up, all of that. And actually what we want to do is to think about, it's a really useful question, is to think about, what would I say to my friend who's just experienced that particular failure at work? You're not going to say to that friend, you're rubbish, why on earth did you do that? How stupid of you. You're going to be saying something that's more compassionate about, well, at least you tried. It's an opportunity to learn. Think about what, you can take from this situation. And, you were brave and courageous to try that out. And just think about changing that inner self-talk to a more compassionate one. And you can also use physical symbols for self-compassion. So research shows that just, even just stroking your hand can activate the soothing system in the brain, or giving yourself a hug where you're just, again, kind of soothing yourself, can be a way to just activate that soothing system in the brain that helps you to feel better about the situation. So thinking about those 4 different approaches and what you might want to experiment with. So we've got rewriting that failure narrative from an identity-based failure to a situational-based failure. Understanding the neuroscience of failure, that you are going to be potentially triggered by that because the brain sees it as a threat, and then putting some techniques in place to help you move to a more logical, from emotional to a more logical response to failure, to recognize failure in terms of positive psychology, that it's an opportunity for growth, to build resilience, to build tenacity and perseverance, and then to build self-compassion into your failure strategy. And what I would always say to you, if you're thinking about experimentation here, is to start small. Choose something where there is a chance that you might fail, but it's a small chance, it has low risk, where you can just build up your risk resilience. You can then move closer to taking bigger risks in the business. When I say risks, this is all in terms of understanding the risk and managing it, and being able to understand what the implications might be of the decisions that you're making, but starting small and building up to it. And I just want to leave you with a really great quote, which I love in terms of failure. It's from Michael Jordan, the basketball player, and he said, "I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I've failed over and over and over again in my life, and that's why I succeed." And I think that's just such a powerful quote and approach to failure. And I really hope you're going to take something positive away from today's session that's going to help you feel more comfortable as a leader around failure. And obviously, if there's anything I've touched on today that you think, I would really value some coaching support to go deeper into some of this and look at how I can really embrace failure and stop holding myself back in terms of my career or my leadership approach, then please do get in touch with me. I'll pop a link in the chat for a career breakthrough call. If that's something you feel would be useful, we can have a 30-minute call to look at what you might need to do to move closer to feeling more comfortable with failure in your leadership career. I wish everybody a very happy Easter holiday. If you're about to go on holiday, let's hope we get some nice sunshine. And I'll see you back here on the 30th of April for the next session in the Getting Stuck series. Thank you very much for joining me.